The alarm on
Do you
Maria
know who I
Evans's
am?
old phone buzzed at 4:30 in the morning. She opened her eyes in the darkness of her small apartment and took a deep breath. For the past 7 years, she had been waking up at this exact time, and her body knew the routine by heart. Maria sat up slowly, her muscles still sore from yesterday's cleaning shift. She was 52 years old, but her military training had kept her body strong and disciplined. She stretched her arms above her head and touched her toes, a habit she had kept since her days in the Air Force. She walked to the bathroom and washed her face with cold water, looking in the mirror. She saw the lines around her eyes and the gray streaks in her dark hair. These were marks of a life lived with purpose, a life that had seen things most people could never imagine. Maria made herself a simple breakfast of eggs and toast. She sat at her small kitchen table and drank her coffee black. No sugar, no cream. She had always been a simple person, never asking for much, never complaining about what life gave her. By 5:15, she was dressed in her work uniform, dark blue pants and a matching shirt with the company logo. She put her hair in a tight bun, the way she had worn it in the military. She grabbed her car keys and headed out into the cool morning air. The drive to Blackstone Enterprises took about 30 minutes. Maria listened to the radio softly as she drove. She passed through empty streets and watched as the sky slowly changed from black to dark blue to gray. The sun was just beginning to rise when she pulled into the parking lot. It was 6 in the morning and the lot was almost empty. Only a few cars belonged to other early workers, managers and executives who came in before the rest of the staff. Maria parked her old Honda Civic in the back corner. Far from the fancy cars, she had always been careful to stay out of the way. She grabbed her large cleaning bag from the back seat. It was heavy, filled with mops, brushes, cleaning solutions, and cloths. She had organized it perfectly, everything in its place, everything ready for the day. That was how she did everything, methodical and precise. As she walked through the parking lot, Maria noticed the morning dew on the cars. She could smell the fresh air and the smell of coffee coming from somewhere inside the building. The sun was getting brighter, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She had never complained about her job, even though she cleaned the offices of people who made 10 times her salary. Even though some of them treated her like she was invisible, Maria understood that everyone had a role to play, and her role was to keep the office clean. She opened the side door of the building with her keycard. The hallway was quiet and empty. Her footsteps echoed on the tile floor. She made her way to the supply closet on the first floor and arranged her cleaning cart. Checking that everything was there, Maria started on the ground floor. Moving through the offices with a quiet efficiency, she dusted desks, emptied trash cans, and wiped down surfaces. She worked carefully, making sure everything was perfect. This was her job, and she took pride in doing it well. By 7 in the morning, she had finished the ground floor. She loaded her cart onto the elevator and pressed the button for the second floor. As the elevator climbed, she thought about her day ahead. She had 3 more floors to clean before the office officially opened at 9 p.m. The second floor belonged to the managers and some of the executives. The offices were bigger here, with nicer furniture and better views. Maria cleaned them all with the same care and attention. She made no distinction between the small cubicles and the large executive suites. It was now 7:45, and Maria was on the 3rd floor. She could hear some workers starting to arrive downstairs. She could hear the sound of cars in the parking lot. The day was beginning, and most people were just waking up. Getting ready for their work, Maria continued her work, cleaning one office after another. She did not think about much as she worked. Her mind was calm and focused. She thought about her daughter who was studying to be a nurse. She thought about the bills she needed to pay, but mostly she just focused on the work in front of her. At 8:30, she was finishing the 3rd floor. Only the executive floor remained, the 4th floor where the top managers and the owner, Russell Young, had their offices. She collected her cart and headed to the elevator. She did not know that this morning would be different from all the others. She did not know that her past was about to come crashing into her present in the parking lot below. Russell Young woke up in his penthouse apartment on the top floor of the luxury high-rise downtown. His bedroom was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. The morning sun streamed through the glass, lighting up the expensive furniture and artwork on the walls. He lay in his king-sized bed for a few moments, checking his phone. There were already 15 emails waiting for him, and it was not even 7 in the morning. He scrolled through them quickly, his jaw clenching with irritation at each one. Business never stopped, and neither did Russell. Russell was 56 years old and had built his empire from nothing, or so he liked to tell people in reality. His father had given him money to start, but Russell had used that money well. He had invested wisely, made bold moves, and crushed his competitors. Now Blackstone Enterprises was worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and Russell Young was a very wealthy man. He stood up and walked to the mirror. Admiring his reflection, he was tall and fit. His personal trainer came to his apartment 3 times a week. His hair was still dark, just beginning to gray at the temples, and his expensive clothes and jewelry made him look every bit the powerful executive he believed himself to be. Russell showered in his marble bathroom, using expensive soaps and shampoos that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. He dressed in a tailored Italian suit, a silk tie, and leather shoes that had been custom-made for him in Milan. He checked his appearance one more time in the mirror and smiled at what he saw. His driver was waiting downstairs in the garage with his black Mercedes. Russell never drove himself, he considered it beneath him. He got in the back seat and settled into the soft leather, checking his phone again as the car moved through the city streets. It was 8:15 when they arrived at Blackstone Enterprises. The parking lot was beginning to fill up. Other cars were arriving, workers and staff members parking in their designated spots. Russell's driver pulled into the reserved spot right at the front entrance. The best spot in the entire lot. Russell stepped out of the car, his mind already racing through the meetings he had scheduled for the day. There was a board meeting at 9:20, a conference call with Tokyo at 10:30, and lunch with a potential business partner at noon. His day was packed as always, and he had no patience for anything that might slow him down. He walked quickly toward the entrance, his phone already to his ear. He was on a call with his business partner Derek, discussing a deal that was falling apart. Russell was angry, his voice was sharp and demanding. He gestured wildly as he talked, even though Derek could not see him. "I do not care about the excuses," Russell said loudly into his phone. "Make it work, or you are fired." He ended the call abruptly without waiting for a response. He was like this with everyone, abrupt and harsh, believing that fear and intimidation were the best ways to manage people. Russell entered the building through the side door, the same door Maria had used an hour earlier. His mind was so focused on his problems that he barely noticed the hallway around him. He was thinking about money, about power, about the people who worked for him who he saw as beneath him. He rode the elevator to the 4th floor, his private floor where his office and the offices of the top executives were located. On the way up, he checked his appearance one more time in the polished steel reflection of the elevator doors. He straightened his tie and ran his fingers through his hair. When the elevator doors opened, his secretary was already at her desk, waiting for him. "Good morning, Mr. Young," she said nervously. She was always nervous around him. Most people were. "Coffee," Russell commanded, without looking at her, black, hot, and strong. He did not say please or thank you. He never did. He walked past her desk and into his office, slamming the door behind him. His office was enormous, with a view of the entire city. His desk was made of imported wood, and his chair was leather and very expensive. Everything in his office was designed to show power and wealth. Nothing was there for comfort, only for show. Russell sat at his desk and began reading through papers and documents. His secretary brought his coffee, and he drank it without acknowledging her. He was already stressed about the day, his mind working through problems and solutions. At 8:45, he decided to go back down to his car. He had forgotten his tablet in the back seat. He needed it for the board meeting. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the elevator. Russell had no idea that on his way back to his car, he would encounter someone who was not like the other people in his life, someone who would not be intimidated by his wealth or his anger, someone whose past was far more powerful than his money. Maria finished cleaning the executive floor around 8:40 in the morning. She had polished the conference room table until it shined like glass, emptied all the trash cans, and vacuumed the carpets in every office. Her work was meticulous and perfect, as it always was. She pushed her cleaning cart toward the elevator, the wheels making a soft squeaking sound on the polished floor. Her muscles were tired, but her mind was calm and focused. She had been doing this work for so long that her body moved on autopilot, her hands knowing exactly what to do. The elevator doors opened and Maria stepped inside, pressing the button for the ground floor. As the elevator descended, She thought about going back to her car and heading home. She had finished all her tasks early today, which meant she could maybe stop at the grocery store before heading to her small apartment. When the elevator doors opened on the ground floor, Maria wheeled her cart out into the hallway. The building was getting busier now. More people were arriving. She could hear voices and footsteps from different directions. She made her way toward the side exit that led to the parking lot. The morning air was cool and fresh as she pushed open the heavy door. The parking lot was filling up quickly now. Cars were arriving continuously. People were walking from their vehicles to the building. Maria moved her cart slowly, careful not to bump into anyone. She was heading toward her old Honda Civic in the back corner, when she noticed a figure walking quickly from the building entrance. It was Russell Young, the owner. Maria recognized him immediately, though she had never spoken to him directly. She had seen him a few times in the hallways, always rushing, always on his phone. Russell was walking fast, his mind clearly somewhere else. He was not looking where he was going. He was talking on his phone again, his voice loud and aggressive. "I need that report on my desk in 1 hour," he was saying. "I do not care if you have to work through lunch." Maria slowed her cart to let him pass. She was trying to stay out of his way, to be invisible as she always did. But Russell was not paying attention to where he was walking. He did not see Maria's cleaning cart in his path. His expensive leather shoe caught the edge of the cart's wheel, causing him to stumble slightly. He nearly fell. Catching himself on the side of the cart, his phone went flying from his hand and landed on the pavement a few feet away. For a moment there was silence. Russell's face turned red with anger. He looked at Maria as if she had purposely tried to trip him. His eyes were filled with rage. Maria quickly bent down to pick up her cart, hoping to avoid confrontation. "Watch where you are going with that thing," Russell shouted at her, his voice loud and harsh. Several people in the parking lot turned to look. Maria did not respond. She simply straightened her cart and tried to move it out of his way, but Russell was not finished. He stepped directly in front of her, blocking her path. "I am talking to you," he said loudly. "Do you understand English? Or are you one of those people who does not speak the language?" Maria looked up at him. Her eyes calm but alert, she did not say anything. She had learned long ago that sometimes the best response was no response at all. She tried to move her cart around him, but he stepped in her way again. Russell's face was twisted with anger. He was not used to being ignored. No one ignored him. Everyone jumped when he spoke. Everyone obeyed his commands. But Maria simply stood there, waiting for him to move. "You are completely incompetent," Russell said, his voice dripping with contempt. "How much do they pay you anyway? Probably minimum wage. And you still manage to mess things up?" Maria remained silent. But something in her posture changed slightly. Her shoulders straightened a little. Her jaw tightened. Russell did not notice. He was too focused on his own anger. "Move this cart now," Russell demanded, pointing at it with his finger. When Maria did not move fast enough for him, Russell reached out and grabbed her arm. His hand was tight around her wrist. "Are you deaf as well as stupid?" Maria looked down at his hand on her arm, then looked up at his face for just a moment. Something flickered in her eyes, something that had not been there before. Russell saw it for only an instant, a flash of something dangerous and controlled. Before Russell could realize what was happening, he felt his grip loosen. Maria had twisted her wrist with a smooth, practiced motion that came from years of military training. It was not violent, it was not aggressive. It was simply efficient. Russell jerked his hand back, shocked at what had just happened. He had not even felt her do anything, but suddenly she was free, and there was a sharp pain in his wrist. "Do not touch me," Maria said quietly, her voice calm but firm. It was the first time she had spoken all morning. Russell stared at her, his face pale now instead of red. Something in her eyes told him that he had just made a serious mistake. Russell Young stood frozen in the parking lot, staring at Maria with a mixture of shock and confusion. His wrist throbbed with pain, a pain that seemed impossible to have come from such a small, quiet woman. He rubbed his wrist slowly, trying to understand what had just happened. Maria did not move. She stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her posture calm and balanced. Her eyes remained focused on Russell, watching him carefully, assessing his next move. This was something she had been trained to do, to read people, to anticipate their actions. Russell's initial shock began to transform into anger again, but it was a different kind of anger now. It was mixed with uncertainty. He had never been challenged like this before. No one had ever stood up to him, especially not someone like this janitor. "You think you are tough," he said, his voice shaking slightly. He stepped toward Maria, his fist raised. He was going to teach her a lesson. No one disrespected Russell Young and got away with it. But before his fist could move forward, Maria shifted her weight smoothly to the side. Russell's punch sailed through the air and hit nothing but empty space. He stumbled forward slightly, his momentum carrying him past her. He turned around quickly, his face now a deep shade of red, fury burning in his eyes. "You are finished," he growled at her. He came at her again, this time with more aggression. He threw another punch, aiming for her face. But Maria was already moving. Her body responded with the precision and speed of someone who had trained for decades. She ducked under his punch and moved to the side in one smooth motion. Russell was breathing hard now, his expensive suit getting wrinkled, his hair falling into his face. He had never fought before. His wealth had always protected him from such situations. He had people to do things for him, people who obeyed him, but Maria was different. Several people in the parking lot had noticed the commotion. A group of employees stood nearby, watching in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this before. Russell Young, the powerful millionaire owner of the company, was fighting with the janitor. Russell lunged at Maria again, but this time he grabbed for her throat, his hands wrapped around her neck, trying to use his superior strength and weight to overpower her. He pressed her backward, thinking that he finally had the upper hand. But Maria had anticipated this move in the military. She had trained extensively in hand-to-hand combat. She had learned how to fight against bigger, stronger opponents. She had learned that size and strength were not always the deciding factors in a confrontation. With controlled precision, Maria raised her arms up and outward, breaking Russell's grip on her throat at the same moment. She twisted her body and used her hip to throw him off balance. Russell stumbled backward, his feet losing their purchase on the ground. He fell hard onto the pavement, the wind knocked out of his lungs. He lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, his hands scraping against the rough asphalt. He could not believe what was happening. He could not believe that this was real. Maria stepped back, creating distance between them. Her breathing was controlled and steady. She did not appear tired or even particularly stressed. She stood in a defensive stance, ready for whatever Russell might try next. But she made no move to attack him. Russell slowly pushed himself up onto his elbows. He was hurt now, his hands were bleeding. His suit was torn, his pride was shattered. He looked up at Maria with a new expression in his eyes. No longer anger, but fear. "Who are you?" Russell asked, his voice hoarse from where her hands had grabbed his throat. "What are you?" Maria did not answer immediately. She simply stood there watching him. Her military background was evident now in every movement, in her stance, in her calm composure. There was a confidence and control about her that had nothing to do with physical strength. "I am someone you should have left alone," Maria said finally, her voice quiet but firm. By this time, more people had gathered in the parking lot. Security guards were running toward them. Several employees were on their phones, probably calling 911. The peaceful morning at Blackstone Enterprises had turned into something completely unexpected. Russell struggled to his feet, his body aching. He wiped blood from his hands and looked around at all the people watching him. He saw the shame in their eyes, the shock and disbelief for so many years. He had been the powerful one, the one in control. But in just a few minutes, everything had changed. Maria stood calmly, waiting for the security guards to reach them. She knew what would happen next. There would be questions, there would be explanations, but she was not worried. She had done nothing wrong. She had only defended herself, and the law was on her side. As the security guards approached, Russell realized something that he had never truly understood before. True power did not come from money or position. True power came from discipline, training, and the strength of character. And in that moment, standing bruised and defeated in front of his employees, Russell Young finally understood what it meant to face someone who truly had power. The security guards reached the parking lot scene within seconds. Their radios were crackling with urgent messages, voices calling for backup and medical assistance. The morning had transformed from ordinary routine into chaos and confusion. James Mitchell, the head of security at Blackstone Enterprises, was the first to arrive. He was a tall man in his 50s. With years of experience working in corporate security, he assessed the situation quickly. taking in Russell's disheveled appearance, his torn suit, his bleeding hands, and then looking at Maria standing calmly in the center of the parking lot. "What happened here?" James asked, his voice calm and professional. He had seen many things in his career, but nothing quite like this. Before anyone could answer, more employees came rushing out of the building. Word had spread quickly through the office. The janitor had fought with the boss. The rich millionaire owner had been thrown to the ground. People were stunned and confused. They wanted to see for themselves. Among the crowd was Derek Chen, Russell's business partner and closest associate. Derek pushed through the gathering employees, his face showing concern. "Russell, what happened? Are you all right?" Russell was still catching his breath. His face flushed with embarrassment and pain. He looked at the crowd of people surrounding him, all eyes fixed on him, waiting to hear his explanation. For a moment he did not know what to say. "She attacked me," Russell said finally, pointing at Maria, his voice shaking with anger and humiliation. "This woman attacked me without provocation. I was simply walking to my car, and she grabbed me." Maria remained silent. She did not defend herself, she did not make excuses. She simply stood there with her hands at her sides, her expression calm and neutral. The security guards looked at her, uncertain about what to do. "Is that true?" James asked Maria, his tone professional but with a hint of skepticism. He had worked at the company long enough to understand Russell's temperament and his tendency to overreact. "He grabbed my arm," Maria said simply, her voice quiet but clear. "I defended myself. I did not attack him. I only freed myself from his grip," the crowd murmured among themselves. People began talking quietly, exchanging glances. Some of them had seen the incident. Others were hearing about it secondhand, but word spread quickly through the group that Russell had been the one to initiate physical contact. One of the witnesses, a young woman named Jennifer who worked in accounting, stepped forward. "I saw what happened," she said, her voice nervous but determined. "Mr. Young grabbed her arm first. He was yelling at her, and when she tried to move away, he grabbed her throat." Another witness, an older man named Thomas who worked in the mailroom, nodded in agreement. "That is right," he said. "I saw the whole thing. He was very aggressive with her. She just defended herself." Russell's face turned even redder, his anger now mixed with desperation. He looked around at the faces of his employees, seeing doubt in their eyes, seeing judgment. "I am the owner of this company," he said loudly. "I can do what I want, and none of you can tell me otherwise," but his words only seemed to make things worse. The employees exchanged more looks. There was a new tone in the crowd, a sense that something important was happening, that they were witnessing a moment of real change. James stepped closer to Maria, his hand resting on his belt. "We need to get statements from everyone who saw what happened," he said. "And we need to call the police. There has been a physical altercation, and we need to have it documented properly," Russell immediately objected. "No police," he said firmly. "This is a private matter. We can handle it internally," but James shook his head. "I am sorry, sir, but protocol requires that we report any incident involving physical violence, regardless of who is involved. The police will need to interview everyone." An ambulance arrived a few minutes later. Along with 2 police officers, the paramedics checked Russell for injuries, treating his scraped hands and examining his throat where Maria's hands had made contact. He was not seriously hurt, but his pride was wounded far more deeply than his body. The police officers began interviewing witnesses. More and more people came forward, telling their version of events. The story that emerged was clear and consistent. Russell Young had initiated the physical confrontation, and Maria Evans had responded with appropriate self-defense. As the police spoke with Maria, she told them about her military background. She explained that she had been trained in hand-to-hand combat and self-defense, that her reactions had been instinctive and controlled. She had not tried to seriously hurt Russell. She had only tried to protect herself. The police officers listened carefully. They took notes. They photographed the scene. They could see that Maria's account of events was supported by multiple witnesses. They could also see that Russell Young, despite his wealth and status, had clearly been the aggressor in this situation. By the time the sun had fully risen over the parking lot, a new reality had emerged at Blackstone Enterprises. The invisible line between the powerful owner and the invisible workers had been broken, and everyone could see that it had been broken. The crowd of employees stood around, watching as the police continued their investigation, and they all knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The police completed their initial investigation by mid-morning. They had interviewed all the witnesses, examined the scene, and taken statements from both Russell and Maria. Officer Patricia Garcia, who was leading the investigation, spoke with James Mitchell about what would happen next. Based on the witness statements and the physical evidence, it is clear that Mr. Young was the primary aggressor. Officer Garcia said, her tone professional and factual. The woman acted in self-defense. She did not initiate the violence, and her response was proportional to the threat she faced. James nodded. He had expected this conclusion. He had already begun to understand that his employer had made a serious mistake, one that would have significant consequences. Officer Garcia then requested to speak with Maria privately. They sat in a small conference room inside the building, away from the chaos of the parking lot. The officer had already begun filling out her report, but she wanted to hear Maria's full story. I want to understand your background, Officer Garcia said, reviewing the notes she had taken. Your responses during the confrontation were very controlled and precise. You clearly have training in combat or self-defense. Maria sat calmly across from the officer, her hands folded in her lap. I served in the United States Air Force for 22 years, she said, her voice steady and clear. I was stationed in various locations around the world. I received extensive training in hand-to-hand combat, weapons, and tactical operations. Officer Garcia's eyes widened slightly. 22 years of military service, she said. That is significant. Why did you not mention this earlier? No one asked, Maria replied simply. I do not talk about my past unless there is a reason to. I have always tried to keep my private life separate from my work. What was your rank? The officer asked. Her curiosity now clearly engaged. Master Sergeant, Maria answered. I worked in Air Force security forces. I trained other soldiers in combat techniques and defensive tactics. Officer Garcia set down her pen and looked at Maria directly. So you are highly trained in combat and weapons use. You could have seriously hurt Mr. Young if you had wanted to. Yes, Maria said simply. But I did not want to hurt him. I only wanted him to release me. I used the minimum amount of force necessary to achieve that goal. That is what I was trained to do. As this conversation was happening, word was spreading through the office building like wildfire. The employees were talking about Maria's military background, sharing what they had learned. The story transformed from a simple incident between a boss and a janitor into something much larger. By lunchtime, almost everyone in the building knew that Maria Evans, the quiet woman who cleaned their offices every morning, was a highly trained military professional with over 2 decades of service. The conversations in break rooms and offices became focused on this revelation. Jennifer, the accountant who had witnessed the incident, sat at her desk and searched for information about Maria online. She found her name in various military databases and archives, confirming her service record. She also discovered articles about military commendations and training programs that Maria had participated in. In the executive offices, Derek Chen was having a very different conversation with Russell. This is a disaster, Derek said, shaking his head. Do you understand what you have done? You assaulted an employee in front of dozens of witnesses, and that employee is a decorated military veteran. Russell sat behind his desk, his hand still bandaged, his suit still torn, his face still showing the marks of the confrontation. She should have just moved out of my way, he said defensively. It was not that serious. Not that serious, Derek repeated, his voice rising. Russell, you grabbed her throat. You tried to fight her, you lost. And now your entire company knows about it. Every single person in this building now knows that you are capable of violence, that you abuse your power, and that you are not as untouchable as you thought you were. Back in the conference room, Officer Garcia finished her interview with Maria. Thank you for your service, the officer said, standing and extending her hand to Maria. What happened today was self-defense, and the law is on your side. I will be filing my report accordingly. As Maria left the conference room and returned to the hallway, employees who passed her seemed to look at her differently. There was respect in their eyes now, where before there had been invisibility. People nodded at her, some even smiled. One young man stopped to thank her for standing up to Russell. By the end of the day, Maria's story had become the talk of the entire company. People who had worked at Blackstone Enterprises for years were seeing their workplace through new eyes. They saw that the power structure they had accepted for so long was not as solid as they had believed. They saw that there were people among them with real strength, real courage, real character. Maria continued with her work, finishing her cleaning tasks for the day, but everything had changed. The invisible woman was now visible. The quiet worker was now recognized, and the company would never quite be the same again, because everyone now understood that beneath the surface of ordinary people, there could be extraordinary strength and extraordinary stories waiting to be discovered. 3 days after the parking lot incident, Russell Young sat in a conference room with his legal team and representatives from the Human Resources Department. His lawyer, a sharp woman named Sandra Williamson, was explaining his legal situation in clear terms. "The evidence overwhelmingly supports Ms. Evans' account of events," Sandra said, reviewing the police report and witness statements. "You were the primary aggressor. You initiated physical contact. You attempted to restrain her against her will, and you attempted to strike her. She responded with appropriate self-defense. There is no legal case against her, and frankly, you are fortunate she did not press charges against you." Russell sat silently, his arms crossed, his face sullen. He had spent the last 3 days in shock and denial. He had tried to convince himself that the incident was minor, that it would blow over. But it was becoming increasingly clear that this was not going to be the case. The HR director, Michael Torres, spoke next. "Mr. Young, we need to discuss several matters first. We have received multiple complaints from employees regarding your behavior and conduct over the years. These complaints had never been formally documented until now, but with the incident in the parking lot, employees have come forward." "What kind of complaints?" Russell asked, his voice defensive, verbal abuse, intimidation, creating a hostile work environment, treating staff with disrespect, Michael listed. "We are talking about years of behavior that has created a culture of fear in this company," Sandra interjected. "I strongly advise you that any attempt to retaliate against Ms. Evans or any employee who has come forward will result in serious legal consequences. We are already looking at potential lawsuits regarding workplace harassment and discrimination." Russell felt his world crumbling around him. His power, which he had believed to be absolute, was suddenly meaningless. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "First, you need to issue a formal apology to Ms. Evans," Michael said. "A sincere apology, not something perfunctory. Second, you need to undergo anger management and leadership training. Third, we are implementing new workplace policies and conduct standards that apply to everyone, including you." "And if I refuse?" Russell asked. Sandra leaned forward. "Then you will face a lawsuit that will cost you millions of dollars. And your reputation will be destroyed. I would strongly recommend cooperation." The next morning, Russell attended a mandatory meeting in the main conference room with all employees present. His hands were shaking as he stood before the crowd of people he had ruled over with fear and intimidation for so many years. Maria stood in the back of the room near the door, her expression unreadable. "I want to address what happened 3 days ago," Russell began, his voice weak and uncertain. "I was wrong. I was completely wrong. I acted with aggression and disrespect toward an employee, and I have no excuse for my behavior." He paused, looking out at the faces watching him. "I apologize to Maria Evans, not just for the incident in the parking lot, but for years of creating an environment where employees are treated with disrespect and fear. That ends today, effective immediately. We are implementing new workplace conduct policies. Harassment and aggression of any kind will not be tolerated. I am committing to undergoing professional training to become a better leader. I ask for your patience and your trust as we make these changes." There was silence in the room. Some employees looked skeptical. Others appeared hopeful that real change might actually occur. After the meeting, Russell approached Maria in the hallway. He was nervous, uncertain of how she would respond to him. "Miss Evans, I want to apologize again personally for what I did, for how I have treated you and others." Maria looked at him steadily. "Your apology is accepted," she said simply. "I hope you will follow through on your words with actions." "I will," Russell said. And for the first time, he seemed to genuinely mean it. Over the following weeks, changes began to take place at Blackstone Enterprises. Russell attended his anger management classes. He worked with a leadership coach to understand his flaws. He began to treat employees with basic respect and courtesy. The employee complaints that had been filed were addressed. Some employees received settlements for past harassment. Others simply felt heard for the first time. The workplace culture began to shift, slowly but noticeably. Maria continued her work as a janitor, but she was no longer invisible. People greeted her in the mornings, thanked her for her work, and asked about her military experiences. She became a quiet symbol of strength and integrity within the company. One day, about 2 months after the incident, James Mitchell from security approached Maria with a proposal. "The company wants to create a new position," he said, "a director of workplace safety and security. We think you would be perfect for the role." Given your background and what you have shown us, Maria considered the offer carefully. "I will think about it," she said, "but I'm happy with my current position." James smiled. "Just know that the door is open whenever you are ready. You have shown us all something important. You have shown us that real strength comes from within." As James walked away, Maria looked out the window at the parking lot below, where it had all begun. She had not come to this job looking for change, but sometimes change finds you, and sometimes you are exactly the right person to make it happen. 6 months had passed since that morning in the parking lot when everything changed. The summer sun was shining brightly over the city, and Maria Evans stood in her small apartment, looking at the job offer letter that sat on her kitchen table. She had accepted the position of Director of Workplace Safety and Security at Blackstone Enterprises. It was a significant promotion from her role as a janitor, a position that came with a substantial salary increase and benefits that would change her life. But more importantly, it was a position that would allow her to make a real difference. Maria had spent her military career training people, teaching them discipline, teaching them how to protect themselves and others. Now she would have the opportunity to do the same thing in a corporate setting. She would be responsible for creating policies and programs that would make the workplace safer for everyone. As she prepared for her first day in the new position, Maria thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the years of quiet work, the early mornings, the invisible service. She thought about how one moment, one confrontation could change everything. She dressed in professional business attire instead of her cleaning uniform, a dark blazer and tailored pants. She looked at herself in the mirror and hardly recognized the woman staring back at her. For so long she had been invisible, and now she was stepping into a position of visibility and influence. When Maria arrived at Blackstone Enterprises, the entire company seemed to know about her promotion. Employees greeted her with smiles and words of encouragement. People who had barely acknowledged her before now wanted to shake her hand and wish her well. Her new office was on the 3rd floor, a significant step up from the supply closet where she had stored her cleaning equipment. It had a window, a desk, a computer, and a view of the city. For a woman who had spent so many years in the background, it felt surreal. Derek Chen, Russell's business partner, came to visit her office on her first day. "Congratulations on the position," he said warmly. "This is well-deserved. You have changed this company in ways you probably do not even realize." "I was simply defending myself," Maria said modestly. "No, it was more than that," Derek replied. "You showed us all that we were living in a lie. You showed us that the power structure we had accepted was based on fear and intimidation, not on real leadership. You have given this company an opportunity to become something better." Over the next few months, Maria implemented sweeping changes in workplace safety and conduct. She created mandatory training programs for all managers on proper leadership and employee respect. She established clear reporting procedures for harassment and misconduct. She created support groups and counseling services for employees who had been affected by past poor treatment. The changes were not always easy or welcomed. Some managers resisted, feeling that the new policies limited their authority, but Maria was firm and consistent in her enforcement. She explained to everyone that real strength came from treating people with respect, not from intimidating them. Russell Young also underwent significant changes during this period. He completed his anger management training and continued working with his leadership coach. While he was not a completely different person, he was genuinely trying to improve himself and his behavior. He attended company events with humility rather than arrogance. He listened to employees rather than simply issuing commands. One afternoon, Russell came to Maria's office. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "I know that sounds strange, but what happened that morning, it saved me from myself. I was heading down a destructive path and you stopped me. You gave me a chance to become a better person." Maria listened without responding. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence was the best response. I have also decided to establish a scholarship fund, Russell continued. In your name, for military veterans who want to transition to civilian careers. I thought it would be a way to honor your service and help others like you. Maria nodded. That is a good idea, she said simply. As the year progressed, Blackstone Enterprises became known throughout the industry as a company with exceptional workplace culture and employee satisfaction. Other companies sent representatives to learn about Maria's safety and conduct programs. Universities asked her to speak about leadership and workplace respect. Maria became recognized as an expert in her field. But despite all the external recognition and success, Maria remained essentially the same person she had always been. She was humble and thoughtful. She did not seek attention or praise. She simply did her job with the same dedication and precision that had characterized her military career and her work as a janitor. On the one-year anniversary of the parking lot incident, the company held a special ceremony. Employees gathered to recognize Maria's contributions and the positive changes she had brought to the organization. As she stood in front of the crowd, listening to people speak about her impact, Maria thought about all the years of invisibility, all the early mornings, all the quiet service. She had learned an important lesson, that real strength does not come from wealth or position or power over others. Real strength comes from discipline, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what is right. She had learned that sometimes the most important contributions are made by those whom the world has overlooked. As Maria looked out at the faces in the audience, she saw something that had not been there before. She saw respect. She saw recognition. She saw understanding that this woman, who had once cleaned their offices in silence, possessed a kind of strength and character that could never be bought or sold. She was no longer invisible, but more importantly, she had shown everyone around her that the invisible among them might be carrying stories and strength beyond their imagination.